Yes. Thank you so much for the wonderful welcome. So let me ask a quick question for all of you. What if your company stopped innovating? What if you stopped innovating? Why? Yeah, of course. Thanks for reading my slide. Would you have a job in 5 years? Would your company exist? So the thing about innovation, before you can talk about how valuable it is, you first must think about what the alternative is. That's standing still. And the cost of standing still is getting bigger and bigger because innovation is moving faster. I want you all to think about, you might not be old enough, but I am, a landline. Do you know those phones with cords in your houses? Probably before your time. Those companies, when they innovated, those patents were worth money for decades. A single innovation allowed that company to make money for decades. When the cell phone industry came, those patents were worth money for maybe a decade. Maybe, but probably not. Remember the old flip phones? Anybody here old enough to know? Let's see. How many people had a flip phone? Let's see. Flip phone, flip phone. Oh, at least a few of you. A few of you. You're not that old. No way. You're young. Yeah. Remember those? Those patents were worth money for, maybe 10 years. Okay. How about the smartphone? I'm certain everybody has one of these. These patents are only worth value for a few years. After that, they quickly become obsolete. Innovation is moving faster because the infrastructure that allows it to happen is increasingly advanced. So the very fact that you were innovating in the past and you were successful, it doesn't mean you're going to continue to be. The pace is increased. Therefore, you actually need to increase your pace just to keep up. This also means something else. Innovation is increasingly disruptive. Just ask the guys in the taxi industry. I want you all to imagine you're an executive for a taxi company. All of you, congratulations, you're all CEO of a taxi company. Somebody comes into your office and says, we've got a major competitor, they're going to really damage us, and they're an app. What would you say? Do they own taxis? No. How are you going to get somewhere on a phone? What's it going to do, fly you there? It doesn't make any sense. But it did. And Airbnb disrupts hotels. Innovation increasingly is possible because of the new technologies and advancing to be increasingly from outside your area. So I'm going to ask you an interesting question. Is this being done to you today? Is somebody disrupting you today? If you think your answer is no, it just means you're ignorant. Sorry to say, somebody is. It's whether or not you see them or not. So the cost of standing still is higher today than it's been in the past. It's increasingly not only the pace of innovation, but the disruption of it because of the way technology has advanced. So the question is, what are you going to do about it? The problem is, it's actually really hard to innovate if you're successful. That's an interesting point. You see, if you're a really successful company, I want you to imagine you're a really successful executive. That's not a stretch for most of you. You're a really successful executive. You've got a big company. And someone comes to you and says, I want to do a new project, but it's got a 90% chance of failure. Are you interested? But that's how innovation works. Innovation has high failure rate, but if you're successful and you're making money, it doesn't make any sense for you to do this project. And the guy says, okay, but here's the next part to that project. It's most likely going to wipe out the profits from our existing products. Okay, boy, that really excites you now. Think about it. You're running a very big, successful company. You've got successful products. Somebody brings you a project with a 90-something% chance of failure that's going to wipe out your profits in your existing products. This doesn't seem very interesting to you. That's exactly the problem. Because successful companies have products. They're making money. This amount of risk doesn't make sense. And if you think that's bad, think about you're all executives, meeting with your board. Meet with your board and you say to your board, okay, we're making lots of money and you're getting all your dividends, but I'm going to risk everything for this thing I don't know anything about. And by the way, we have no skill in that area. But I'm pretty sure we'll figure it out. How long would you have your job? That seems silly. Why do we expect large, successful companies to innovate? It's so hard for them. There is so much against it. But they need to innovate. What about the other side of that equation? Let's look at the startups, the small companies, which is what most of you are here today. For you, 90% risk, hey, that's pretty good. Hey, that's better than average. VCs will like that. That's a 10% chance. Right? That's a startup. Somebody says, well, what about our last profits? You say, well, we made $27 last month, so I'm okay losing that money. Right? Think about how much different that conversation is for a small startup. You meet with your board, which is probably your dad, and you say, Dad, I'm going to risk the $27 we made last month to try to do something that's worth $20 million. Okay. Right? That's so different a discussion. You see, the startups, they can innovate because they don't have that same infrastructure, those same problems in place. But you know what they can't do? Is scale. All right, so now you've come up with this great idea and you say, well, all I need is $100 million to get to all these countries. Good luck. So large companies, they have a hard time innovating, but they have great scale, right? They have distribution, they've got people in place, they know the regulatory, they've got all this ability to scale, but they can't innovate. Startups can innovate, but can't scale. Great, you say, let's just have them work together. That sounds like a perfect plan, except it doesn't work. Oops, sounds good, works great on paper. I've lost a lot of money trying it, but it doesn't actually work. There's a lot of problems. You see, it's sort of like teaching an elephant to dance with a mouse. It tends to squash the mouse. You're the mouse. So how does this work? We want to figure out a way to get large companies, and by the way, this can also be government entities as well, which can scale and have resources to work with the smaller players, the startups, which can innovate but can't scale. And the trick to it about getting that elephant to dance with the mouse is to actually figure out a means or a mechanism for them to work together. And that's what we're going to talk about for the next 20 minutes. There is a means, and it's something that I've worked in for many years, both with corporates and startups, to try to get them to work together so both sides win. But mostly so the elephant doesn't squash the mouse. So this is the overview. The first part is I'm going to walk you through the overview here, and then we're going to go into a little bit more detail for the remainder of the time. One of the first important parts is acknowledge what you don't know. You're going to need to find a partner who has expertise. If you're a startup and you want to work with Spearbank, if you've got no one who has worked in a corporate environment, you're going to need help. The military oftentimes refer to it as know your limits. Figure out what you're actually good at. And I want to point out a difference between experience and expertise. Experience means you've done it. Expertise means you're good at it. Don't confuse them. You need expertise to work with large companies. If you're a large company, you need expertise in running these projects. And that's what the first part is, the partner problem. The second thing we're going to talk about is defining the problem. Most people do a poor job of this. If you're a startup, most startups define their problem as what they do. They say, I have a great piece of crypto. I can do these great encryptions. Here's my statement. I don't care. What I care about is the problem you solve for the customer. So when we talk about this process, we're going to be very careful to say both the large company and the startup need to define it not in terms of technology, but in terms of the problem that the customer is trying to solve. Once we get into that, we're going to get into the rest of these, which is selection of the partner, picking of the project and working together on that, pruning or selection of the final projects that you're going to ship, and finally moving to production. And I'm going to make one more note before we move into the details here. One of the key parts of this process, I want you all to imagine, whether you're a large company or a startup, is we want to cheat. Sorry, you want to cheat. You don't want to actually play fair. Sun Tzu talks about winning battles before you get on the battlefield. We are going to walk through a process together so your startup and that large company are going to know you're going to win before you begin. And that's actually what we're trying to accomplish here. We're going to go through a series of steps and analysis, so before you actually expend a large amount of effort working with the partner, you're going to actually know it's going to be a success. So let's talk about how to cheat, or how to win, whichever way you want to view it. The first part is that first part about knowing your limits. You're not going to know everything. If you're a startup, you have limited resources. If you want to accomplish a task, if the problem that you want to solve requires you to work with a large corporate partner, you're not going to have all the knowledge. So my first statement to you is figure out what you're actually good at. Figure out what you suck at, what you need help in, and look to see if you can't find advisors or others to help you with that. You might need to hire somebody in business development. You might need to work with an advisor. But don't go into this without the right skills. If you are a large corporate, we recommend you consider working with a partner, whether it's organizations like this or someone else. Try to figure out what you're missing in your skill set. How you do that? Again, experience versus expertise. If nobody on your team has successfully done a project like this, an innovation project, you're going to need some help. Let's move on to the second part. So that's the first P. The second part is the problem definition. Here we go. You ready? All of you, congratulations, are now in a startup. One of the key things you want to define when you do a problem is not what you do, your technology, but the problem you solve for your customer. I want all of you to think about what problem you solve for your customer. So, for example, if you were a startup working in the fintech, you might be, we allow our customers to make international payments. That's a problem. You are not a cryptocurrency company. You're not a crypto wallet. I don't care about that. What do you do? At this phase, what do you do for the customers? All that matters. If you are a large company, this is fairly important. Most large companies immediately tell you what they already do. An innovation project is about solving a problem for the customer that you do not currently solve. So my first statement here is large companies, spend the time to figure out what you don't do for customers. If you're a startup, think carefully about what you're putting on your websites and other things. Most companies, when I review them, tell me how they do it. They say their technology. I don't care about that. You need to think about what problem you solve for a customer that requires a corporate partner. If it doesn't require a corporate partner, that's great, but not for my talk today. So now, you've defined a problem. If you are a corporate and you've defined a problem, the next step you're going to do is to try to find companies that can help you solve that problem. And let's walk through that briefly, and then I'm going to talk about the startup side. So imagine you're all executives back in this company again, hopefully not the taxi company, but a large executive now, and I want you to think about, you have this problem. Let's say you're fintech, and you want to allow people to make an international payment. My first statement to you is you need to go out and find a startup partner, like most of you guys, and here's the criteria. It's actually not the product. That's actually not the primary. The first thing is, can you communicate and work effectively with this team? I'm going to make this point fairly carefully. Most people think corporates should find startups that solve a technology problem. That's very short-viewed, and it's actually unsuccessful. What they need to do is say, look, we have a problem, international payments, and we're looking for a partner to help us get there. You might have skills, you might have product, you might have distribution, you might have knowledge. So the key thing here for the corporates is actually for them to look for EQ as much as IQ, which means you as startups need to demonstrate your ability to communicate, to be honest, and to function effectively with them. Your products are going to change. Whatever product you have, it's not going to be the end result. Accept that. Part of the partnership is learning. If you change nothing, what was the purpose of the learning? This is innovation. You're going to learn something, therefore things are going to change. So for a large corporate, they're looking for a startup that has skills they don't have, products they don't have. They can communicate effectively with them. They can work with them informally. There's not going to be a lot of contracts here. There's not going to be a lot of paperwork. So you have to be able to function quickly and verbally. That's why when you're picking this partner, you're looking for people you can work with, not necessarily the perfect technology match. On the startup side, I want you to think about this. Most startups make a big mistake. They take any corporate that returns their call. This is a mistake. You need to define what it is, what your problem that you're solving is, and which corporates will help you get there. If not, you need to walk away. You have limited resources. Your time is limited. You have very few people. Do not waste them on partners that don't work. This is one of the ones we see a lot in startups. They tend to chase any deal they can get. And I say, be very careful about that. Be selective. Choose your partners well. So now we've chosen our partners based upon solving a problem for our customer that we know. The next part to this is actually the process. We recommend you use a lean process, and let's walk through what that means. How many people here know what lean is? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. All the way up, all the way up. Let's see. Okay, some. I'm going to do a brief explanation for those who don't. Lean is a process by which you figure out all the answers. You cheat. You find all the answers to the test before you take it. In this collaboration between startups and large companies, what you're going to do is actually a collaborative project together, and you're going to go out together, that means the startup and the large company, and do a series of analytical steps to validate or prove your assumptions as to things like how much money should we charge? What should the product look like? Who's going to buy it? What's our distribution method? There is something called the Lean Canvas that walks you through this in detail. But here's the key point for today's talk. You're going to cheat by figuring out exactly how much money things cost, how much you can pay for it, how you're going to distribute it, who's going to buy it. You're going to solve all those risky problems. So do you remember in the beginning of this talk, I talked about talking to your boss, walking into his office and saying, I have a 90% chance of failure on my project. What happens if you walked into it and said, I have a 90% chance of success? I know I'm going to make $9 million on my first quarter. I know these 17,000 people are going to be my first buyers. I know I'm going to make a $9 margin. Do you see how different this conversation is? If you're a startup, think about it this way. You're figuring out, before you expend all of your resources, whether you're going to win or not. You already know. That's what Lean and this project is about. You are not building the project. You're actually learning quickly and getting all the answers. You're cheating before you start the test. The same thing for the corporate side. The corporates are going to do the same thing. You see, they get all these answers so they can go to their management. So when they go to their management and talk about this project, they're going to know what the answers look like. And that means tremendously less risk than was previously assumed. So, the purpose of these projects, as you get together, so I want you to imagine you're all in this project. You're going to first get a partner if you need it. The second, you're going to pick a problem that's a customer problem. Right, it's not a technology. You're going to go out and find collaborators, which is either, if you're a startup, a large company or a small one. You're going to get together and you're going to do a project, and you're going to do lean methodology, and you're going to do something called the canvas, the product canvas, to answer all the questions before you expend a large amount of time and money and waste it. And then you will know which ones are going to win. The last part, or this next to last part, is called pruning. If you're a large company, when you go to do this, you're actually going to run 10 to 20 projects at a time. Why? Because you're going to only pick the winners. You see, if you run 10 lean projects, I want you all to imagine, here we go, you're going to run 10 lean projects, and all of them are going to come up with how profitable they are and how difficult they are and who you're going to sell to and all of that. And in front of you is 10 sheets of paper with all of that information. What happens if you just pick the top one or two? Think about how much positive that is for that company, for both the startup involved and for the corporate. These are only the best projects. You've already figured out which ones are going to be great, and now you just pick the great ones. This makes for success, and that means more money, that means more success. You need to be careful that you win these rounds. You cannot actually go forward with 90% chances of failure. So, we're going to pick just the winners. So if you're a startup and you get 10 ideas that you want to solve for customers, and you go through them and you do this work, you're going to find that a bunch of them actually suck. They don't actually solve the problem, or you can't solve the problem. So, discard them. Have a specific time and place, a means by which you eliminate low-quality options. Many, many companies make the mistake of continuously pursuing things that drain their resources. How many of you have done a project that you sort of knew wasn't going to succeed, but you kept going, kept going resources, you kept taking the classes? How many people have done unsuccessful projects? You pretty much knew, right? You can be honest, it's okay. A lot of people are sort of doing this. I understand. We've probably all worked on projects that we sort of knew were unsuccessful. I'm saying initiate, when you start a project, there should be a specific criteria for killing it. If it fails to meet the criteria, and you must set that criteria before you begin, at the point where you complete the canvas, the lean canvas, you make the decision to kill it before you expend a large amount of resources. That's called the pruning step. The next step is called refactor or production. At this point, you've now selected the one or two biggest winners. You've got your cheat sheet. You know what's going to win. You know what you need. Now you actually build the product. At this point, you have what's called an MVP, or a small, very simple product which meets the need of the customer. Now you're moving to scale. Now the corporate partner with the startup, now things really get to pay off, because as a startup, if you get here, you now have a large partner to help you scale, and you know how to scale. If you're a large corporate, you have a major innovation of which you know is going to succeed. It's cheating. Well, that's how you win. You don't actually go into production until you already know you're going to win. The battle is won before you get on the battlefield. Now you expend a large amount of resources and time. And if you're a startup, this is when you go full in and all of your resources are on a project. If you're a corporate, this is the point where you do a large financial allocation. but not before this. It is possible for startups and corporates to work together. It can be successful. The elephant can dance with the mouse, but it takes some skill. It takes some discipline. You have to figure out what you're bad at and bring in partners that can help. You need to select projects that have clear customer problems that you are solving. Not technology, not good ideas, customer problems that they're willing to pay for. You can then find partners that help you solve it, and by doing a lean process, you can collect all the answers together before you exert a large amount of effort and resources. Then prune back any unsuccessful projects, picking just the winners, and moving forward, and then expending a large amount of resources to production. Corporates can work with startups. It can work. It does work. And it helps both sides. For startups, this means an enormous leap in scale. You're a small company, and all of a sudden, you've got enormous sales from this partner. For a corporate, this is the way to innovate. This is a way of them not being the taxi companies. Everybody plays a part. Everybody is valuable. I'd like to thank you for your time. This is the end of the talk. I do hope you got something valuable from it. And at this point, I will turn it back over to...
Thank you. Thank you, Robert Neivert. Thank you. Wait for a minute, Robert. Thank you very much. And you know what? I think we have a couple questions from the audience. Don't go too far.
Oh, yeah, okay, no problem.
So we have time for just 2 or maybe 3 questions from the audience. But first of all, I just want you to listen to one story. Please don't forget you are at the conference, and it's very tough to give your knowledges from our speakers, and they experience, they share it with you. So please be respectful, be quiet. If you need to talk to each other, go downstairs. We have a bunch of networking zones for you. But please, when someone is here on this stage, me or some of the speakers, be quiet. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. All right, so questions, raise your hands. Yes, please, first question. Just.
Okay. Thank you, Robert, for your speech.
Please,
I have
just
a question
quiet,
about your prune part. You said that you have to take many projects, but isn't it better just to focus on one, which is good?
Yes. The idea of pruning, if you're a startup, is to start discussions with multiple corporates, but select just the 1 or 2 that really work best for you. That's pruning. That's actually what that step implies. If it came off the other way, I apologize. That wasn't what I intended. What I really mean is that startups need to be picky too. You really do. Most startups choose any opportunity that comes their way, and that's really a mistake. You need to actually be selective, because a large corporate will waste your time, waste your money, and squash you by accident.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. This guy, yeah, in the end of the audience.
Sorry.
Thank you for your attention, and thank you that you've made quiet atmosphere here.
Yeah. Hi, Robert. Thanks a lot for coming to this speech. So you were saying about the cooperation between startups and the corporates. And one of the vehicles that there is in the market is a corporate VC fund. So what do you think about corporate VCs, and do you think it's beneficial or not? Because as a VC myself, I would not really recommend to my portfolio companies to take on board the majority of corporate VCs as a lead investor, at least.
Okay.
So what's your take on that?
Corporate VCs. So quick history. Several of my previous companies took corporate VC money. Intel Capital and many other funded several of my companies. I'm going to offer a similar statement to his, but it's slightly different. Corporate VCs have a specific role to play, but they are highly biased. So before you take money from them, you should have gone through this process already. The mistake that oftentimes happens is that they end up getting entangled with a partner, in this case a corporate VC, who puts too many constraints on the money. I carefully separate the difference between money and the corporate partner. Those two have to be separate. Corporate VCs often insist that they're the same, and that's dangerous. So let me offer this insight. If a corporate VC approaches you, you need to actually separate the difference between their money and their projects, so that if the project doesn't work, you can terminate it without having a negative problem from the money. Most corporates will not agree to that, and therefore they are limited in what I will do with them, because they will influence things negatively. That being said, my partnership with Intel was very successful. And the reason it was is because we went through this process, or a very similar one, first, established what we knew to be a successful product already. They then contributed money with no constraints on us continuing to work with Intel. I could exit that if I needed to. So it's actually the attachment clause that makes them problematic. There's one small other thing. Most corporate VCs are terrible VCs. They come from the corporate environment, not from the VC side. So they tend to invest as if they owned you. And that's also a problem. But there are several good ones as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your
Thank you so
question.
much.
And thank you, Robert Neivert. Your applause. Thank you very much. And